They laughed when they handed me the crumpled $2 lottery ticket, treating it like a joke about my standing in this family. But my hands didn't start shaking until I saw what was hidden in my father's desk drawer later that night. Now, while they are drinking champagne in the middle of the ocean, I am preparing a phone call none of them will survive professionally. Winning $100 million wasn't the happy ending. It was just the weapon I needed. My name is Paisley Mitchell. I am 34 years old, and in my professional life, I command respect. As a senior landscape designer at Northway Green Studio, I manage commercial projects that reshape the skylines and ground levels of corporate parks across Overland Park, Kansas. I understand root structures, drainage systems, and how to make stubborn things grow in concrete environments. But the moment I turned my sedan onto the driveway of my parents' suburban home for Thanksgiving, I felt that familiar, suffocating regression. I was no longer a woman who managed six-figure budgets. I was just Paisley, the background character in the elaborate stage play of the Mitchell family. The house was already vibrating with noise. My parents, Dale and Caroline, loved to host, not because they enjoyed the company, but because they enjoyed the audience. There were about 20 or maybe 30 relatives packed into the living room and kitchen. Aunts, uncles, and cousins were scattered around like props, holding glasses of Chardonnay and store-bought eggnog. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror to ensure my expression was neutral, and stepped out into the biting November air. I went to the trunk to retrieve the centerpiece I had made. It was an intricate arrangement of dried hydrangeas, late-season ornamental grasses, and winter berries I had cultivated myself. I had spent 3 hours the night before wiring it together, thinking it might be a nice gesture, a bridge between my world and theirs. Entering the house felt like walking into a wall of heat and noise. The smell of roasting turkey was heavy, mixed with the cloying scent of my mother's expensive potpourri. Caroline was in the foyer, holding court with my Aunt June. When she saw me, her eyes didn't light up. They scanned me, looking for a flaw, before landing on the arrangement in my hands. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice carrying that practiced, melodic dismissiveness. She gestured vaguely at the flowers. "What is that?" "It's for the table," I said, my voice steady. "I grew the hydrangeas myself. I thought the colors would match the dining room." Caroline let out a short, sharp laugh, loud enough to make 3 cousins turn their heads. "Still playing with plants, are you? I suppose it's cute. You can put it on the side table in the hallway. I already bought a centerpiece from the florist." "I'm a landscape architect." "Mom," I said, the correction slipping out before I could stop it. "I don't just play with plants." She had already turned away. "Put it in the hall, Paisley, and then come help me. The caterers messed up the appetizers, and I need hands, not attitude." I did as I was told. I placed my work on a crowded console table behind a stack of mail and coats. Where no one would see it, that was my role. The invisible hand, the fixer, the one who made things run smoothly so the stars could shine. And right on cue, the stars arrived. The front door swung open, admitting a gust of cold wind and the booming voice of my brother-in-law, Gavin Rourke. He walked in like he was entering a boardroom he owned, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. On his arm was my older sister, Sloane. She looked radiant. I had to admit, her hair was a perfect cascade of blonde waves, her makeup flawless. She was the golden child, the one who had married well, the one who validated my parents' existence. "Happy Turkey Day, people," Gavin announced, spreading his arms wide. "The market might be volatile, but the Rourke family portfolio is strong." A ripple of laughter went through the room. My father, Dale, hurried over to shake Gavin's hand with an enthusiasm he never showed me. "Good to see you, son. I need to pick your brain later about those municipal bonds." "Anytime. Dale, anytime. You know my philosophy," Gavin said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "Maximize yield, minimize exposure. It is all about the long game." Sloane spotted me standing by the kitchen door. She gave me a little wave, her fingers wiggling. "Hi," Paisley. Oh, look at you. Very sensible outfit. Is that wool? Hi, Sloan, I said. You look great. I feel exhausted, she sighed, draping her coat over the banister for me to pick up. The planning for the holidays is just killing me. Being a hostess is a full-time job. She didn't work. She hadn't worked in 6 years. Paisley, my mother shouted from the kitchen. The wine glasses aren't going to fill themselves. For the next 2 hours, I ceased to be a person. I became a service mechanism. I poured wine. I carried trays of stuffed mushrooms. I wiped up a spill when Uncle Jerry knocked over his scotch. When dinner was finally served, I found myself seated at the very end of the long table, wedged between a high chair and the swinging door to the kitchen. The conversation flowed around me, over me, but never to me. Gavin held court at the head of the table, dissecting the economy while my father nodded sagely. Sloan talked about the renovations they were doing to their master suite. My mother chimed in with compliments, beaming at them as if she had personally sculpted them from clay. I kept my head down, pushing dry turkey around my plate. It was during the lull between the main course and dessert that I heard it. I had gotten up to clear the plates, because obviously, I was the one who did that, and as I stacked china in the kitchen, the voices from the dining room carried clearly through the gap in the door. It is going to be magnificent, my mother was saying. December 5th to the 12th. The weather in the Caribbean is perfect that time of year. And the suite we booked for you and Dad has a balcony, Sloan added. Gavin insisted. He said we can't have you in an interior room. It's the only way to travel, Gavin said. Royal class, private dining, none of that buffet nonsense with the general public. I froze. A dirty plate in my hand. December 5th. That was 2 weeks away. They were talking about a family vacation. A cruise. I just hope Mom is okay with the flight to Florida. My father said. It's a long day. She will be fine, Caroline said. We have the wheelchair assistants booked at the airport. The whole family together on the ocean. It is a dream come true. The whole family. I did the math in my head. December 5th. I had not received an invitation. I had not been asked to check my calendar. I had not been asked for my passport details. I was not invited. A cold numbness started in my fingertips and worked its way up my arms. It wasn't just that they were going without me. It was that they were discussing it openly, just a room away, assuming I was either too deaf to hear or too insignificant to care. I was the landscape designer who was expected to be content with the dirt while they sailed on the ocean. I walked back into the dining room to collect more plates. The conversation stopped abruptly, then pivoted awkwardly. Great turkey, Mom, Gavin said loudly. Really moist. I didn't say anything. I just cleared the table. As I reached for my grandmother's plate, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Grandma Eloise was nearly 90. She was frail, her skin like parchment paper, and she spent most of her days in a fog of dementia and medication. But in that moment, her eyes were startlingly clear. She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way no one else in that room had done all day. She pulled me down slightly, her grip surprisingly tight. Paisley, she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. Listen to me. I'm here. Grandma, I whispered back. Call Ethan Caldwell this week, she rasped. I frowned. Who? She didn't repeat it. The clarity vanished from her eyes as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the usual cloudy confusion. She let go of my hand and went back to staring at her water glass. Mom, is Grandma okay? Caroline asked sharply from the other end of the table. She looks agitated. Paisley, are you bothering her? No, I said, straightening up. I'm just clearing her plate. Well, hurry up, my father said, patting his stomach. It is time for the gifts. We have a big announcement. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what the announcement was. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to get in my car and drive until the gas tank was empty, but I couldn't. I was trapped in the script. We moved to the living room. The gift exchange was a Mitchell tradition, usually reserved for Christmas. But this year Gavin had insisted on doing it at Thanksgiving because of fiscal timing or some other nonsense. We sat in a circle. The air was thick with anticipation. Sloane went first. My father stood up, beaming. He held a thick, heavy, cream-colored envelope. He walked over to Sloane and handed it to her with a flourish. "For our beautiful girl," he said. "Because you deserve the world." Sloane tore open the envelope. She pulled out a glossy brochure and a stack of itinerary papers. She gasped, covering her mouth with her manicured hands. "Oh my God!" she squealed. "The Royal Caribbean Jubilee. The owner's suite?" 7 days, Gavin announced, clapping his hands. "All expenses paid. A little thank you from Mom and Dad for everything we do." "How much?" Sloane pretended to be scandalized. "Dad, this is too much." $13,000, my father said proudly, making sure the entire room heard the number. "But you can't put a price on family memories." The room erupted in applause. My aunts and uncles cooed. Sloane hugged my mother, then my father. Gavin looked smug, nodding as if he had brokered the deal himself. "It is going to be the trip of a lifetime," Caroline said, wiping a tear from her eye. "Just us." Then the room went quiet. The performance wasn't over. My father turned to me. He didn't have a thick envelope. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a thin, flimsy card. He walked over to where I was sitting on the ottoman, the only seat left, and handed it to me. "And for Paisley," he said. His tone was different. It lacked the warmth, the pride. It was the tone you use when you tip a waitress you will never see again. "We didn't forget you." I took the envelope. It was light as air. "Go on," Gavin urged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Open it." I slid my finger under the flap. Inside, there was a single card. I pulled it out. It was a scratch-off lottery ticket. "Holiday Lucky Sevens." Price, $2. I stared at it. The garish red and green colors seemed to mock me. $13,000 for Sloane, $2 for me. The disparity wasn't just a gap. It was a canyon. It was a statement. This is what you are worth to us. "Hey, don't knock it," Gavin laughed, leaning back in the recliner. "The jackpot is pretty high. Maybe you will get lucky and finally be able to afford a new car." A few cousins chuckled. My mother smiled, a tight, patronizing expression. "It is just a little fun. Paisley, don't look so serious. We know you are struggling with your budget, so we didn't want to get you something you would just have to maintain." Struggling? I owned my own condo. I had a 401k. I wasn't rich. But I wasn't struggling. But that was the narrative they needed. Paisley the charity case. Paisley the failure. I looked down at the $2 ticket. I looked at Sloane, clutching her $13,000 cruise itinerary. I looked at my parents, who were waiting for me to say thank you. Something inside me broke. But it wasn't a loud break. It wasn't a shatter. It was a silent, mechanical click, like a lock engaging or a safety being switched off. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the ticket at them. I didn't scream about the cruise I wasn't invited to. The humiliation was total, absolute, and publicly executed. And in that absolute zero of emotion, I found a strange clarity. I raised my head. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a calm, unreadable smile. "Thank you," I said softly. "I appreciate the thought." "That is the spirit," my father said, turning away, already losing interest. "All right, who wants pie?" Gavin chuckled again. "Let us know if you win $5. Paisley, drinks are on you." They all laughed. They turned their backs to me, drifting toward the dining room for dessert, already forgetting I was there. I sat alone on the ottoman, holding the $2 ticket. I reached into my pocket for a coin. I didn't scratch it there. Not yet. I just held it. They thought this was a joke. They thought this was the punchline of the night. But as I watched them walk away, Sloane's hand on my mother's back, Gavin clapping my father on the shoulder, I realized something. They had just handed me my exit strategy. They had drawn the line in the sand. I was on the other side, and the woman who sat on that ottoman was no longer the daughter who wanted their approval. She was someone else entirely. and she was about to scratch a ticket that would change the gravitational pull of this entire family. The party did not end when the gifts were opened. It merely shifted phases. The performance moved from the living room to the dining table, where maps of the Caribbean were spread out like war plans. My mother, Caroline, was tracing the route of the ship with a manicured finger, her voice pitching high with excitement as she described the midnight buffet and the captain's cocktail hour. My father, Dale, sat back with a glass of scotch, nodding in a rhythm that suggested he was already mentally packing his bags. Sloane and Gavin were the stars of this show, holding court, discussing shore excursions in Cozumel and private cabanas in Labadee. I was not part of this planning session. My exclusion was as physical as a wall. While they debated the merits of upper deck versus lower deck dining, I was standing at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in soapy water that had turned tepid and gray. The clatter of china and silver was my soundtrack. I scrubbed the gravy boat. I scraped dried cranberry sauce off the serving platter. I was the invisible machinery that kept the Mitchell household running, the gears that turned silently, so the show out front could continue without a hitch. No one offered to help. Why would they? That would break the immersion of the scene. The landscape designer was used to dirt and labor. Surely she preferred the company of dirty dishes to the discussion of luxury travel. Once the last plate was dried and stacked, I looked around the kitchen. There was a pile of leftover turkey and stuffing on the counter that my mother would want packed away. I needed something to wrap them in. Perhaps some of the heavy-duty foil or parchment paper my father sometimes kept in his home office for shipping packages. We were out of it in the kitchen pantry. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked down the hallway. The laughter from the dining room followed me, a distant, mocking echo. I reached the door of my father's study. It was usually a forbidden zone, a sanctuary of serious business where he managed the family's supposedly vast investments. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and old leather. It was dark, illuminated only by the street lamp outside filtering through the blinds. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I just wanted to find the wrapping supplies and leave. I walked behind the heavy mahogany desk, pulling open the bottom drawer where I knew he kept miscellaneous stationery. It was jammed. I tugged at it, frowning. Something was catching on the mechanism. I gave it a harder pull, and the drawer slid open with a protest of scraping metal. It wasn't jammed with wrapping paper. It was jammed with chaos. My father was a man who prided himself on appearances. His suits were pressed, his car was waxed, and his lawn was manicured. But looking into that drawer was like looking into the mind of a drowning man. Papers were shoved in haphazardly, crumpled and torn. There were envelopes with red stamps that screamed urgency. I reached in to move a stack of manila folders, hoping the foil was underneath. As I shifted the pile, a letter slid out and landed on the floor. I bent to pick it up. Even in the dim light, the bold red letters at the top were legible. Final notice, past due. I frowned. My father constantly bragged about his credit score. He lectured me on fiscal responsibility every time I visited. I turned the letter over. It was a demand for payment on a credit card I didn't know he had. With a balance that made my stomach turn, I should have stopped there. I should have put the letter back, found the foil, and left. But the silence of the room felt heavy, charged with a sudden, suffocating gravity. I looked back at the drawer. There was a blue folder, thicker than the others, wedged awkwardly against the side. It looked new. I pulled it out. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I opened it. The first document was a loan agreement. It wasn't from a bank. The letterhead belonged to a private lending firm I had never heard of. Something generic and ominous like Apex Capital Solutions. I scanned the numbers. The principal amount was staggering, enough to buy a modest house in my neighborhood, but it was the interest rate that made me blink. 25%. It was predatory. It was the kind of loan you took when the banks had already slammed their doors in your face. I looked at the bottom of the page for the signature. There was my father's scrawl, large and flamboyant, and right next to it, as a cosigner, was another signature, sharp, angular, Precise. Gavin Rourke. I froze. Gavin, the financial genius. Gavin, who had just spent $13,000 on a cruise for my sister. He wasn't just observing my father's financial decline. He was financing it, or perhaps he was exploiting it. Why would a wealthy financial advisor co-sign a high-interest predatory loan for his father-in-law unless there was leverage involved? My hands were trembling slightly. I turned the page. The next document was different. It wasn't about money, at least not directly. It was a legal document regarding property transfer. I recognized the address immediately. 1402 Maplewood Drive. My grandmother Eloise's house. The house she had lived in for 40 years. The house she had sworn she would never sell. The only place on earth where she felt safe. I read the text. It was a transfer of deed, coupled with a durable power of attorney agreement. It gave my mother, Caroline Mitchell, full authority to liquidate the asset for the benefit and care of the principal. I looked at the date, October 14th. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea rolling over me. October 14th. That was the week Grandma had been hospitalized for dehydration and a severe reaction to her new medication. I remembered visiting her. She had been delirious, barely able to recognize me, drifting in and out of consciousness. I opened my eyes and looked at the signature line on the deed transfer. Eloise Mitchell. But it wasn't her signature, not really. It was a shaky, erratic spider crawl of ink. It trailed off at the end, as if the hand holding the pen had been weak or guided by someone else. It looked like the signature of a woman who didn't know what she was signing, or who was too exhausted to fight the hand forcing the pen. A sound from the hallway made me jump, a floorboard creaking. "Where is Paisley?" I heard my mother's voice, closer this time. "We need to get this food packed up." "She's probably sulking somewhere," Gavin's voice replied, followed by a low chuckle. Panic flared in my chest, but I shoved it down. I couldn't be found looking at these, but I couldn't leave them here, hidden in the dark, either. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I didn't use the flash. I held the phone steady, using the ambient light from the street lamp, and snapped a photo of the loan agreement, focusing on the signatures. Then I flipped to the property deed. Click, the power of attorney. Click, the medical dates on the attached addendum. Click. I worked with a speed I didn't know I possessed. Within 30 seconds, I had images of the most damning pages. I immediately opened my secure email app, a habit from working with proprietary architectural designs, and attached the photos to a new draft. I typed a random string of characters as the subject line and hit send, directing it to a secondary storage account I used for cloud backups. Then, I selected the photos in my camera roll and deleted them. I shoved the papers back into the blue folder and jammed it back into the drawer. Exactly how I had found it. I closed the drawer just as the doorknob began to turn. I spun around, grabbing a roll of packing tape from the top of the desk, the only thing within reach, and held it up just as the door swung open. It was Gavin. He stopped in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. He was holding a glass of wine, his tie loosened. He looked at me, then at the desk, then back at me. His eyes were cold, calculating, stripping away the layer of jolly brother-in-law he wore for the audience. "What are you doing in here, Paisley?" he asked. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, a threat. "Looking for tape," I said. Holding up the roll, my voice was steady. It surprised me. "Mom wants the leftovers packed. We were out in the kitchen." He stared at me for a long second, his gaze flicking to the drawer I had just closed. I didn't flinch. I channeled every ounce of indifference I had cultivated over years of being the disappointment. I needed him to see me as he always saw me. Harmless, stupid, irrelevant Paisley. "Right," he said finally, taking a sip of his wine. "Well, hurry up. Your mother is waiting. We don't want to keep the cleanup crew waiting, do we?" "Coming," I said. I brushed past him. I could smell the expensive cologne he wore, masking the scent of the rot I had just uncovered. I walked back to the kitchen, my legs feeling like lead. I taped up the boxes of leftovers. I wiped down the counters. I did everything on autopilot. But my mind was racing, rewriting the entire history of my family. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just that they liked Sloane better. It was a strategy. They needed me to be the failure. They needed me to be the one who didn't understand money, the one who played with plants, because if I were competent, if I were successful, I might ask questions. I might wonder why Dad's business was always expanding, but never liquid. I might ask why Grandma's house was suddenly being discussed as an asset to be managed. They needed me small so they could steal without witnesses. I looked across the room at my mother. She was helping Grandma Eloise stand up from the sofa. "Come on, Mom," Caroline was saying, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Let us get you to the guest room. You look tired." I watched her hands. They weren't gentle. They were firm, guiding, controlling. She was gripping Grandma's arm just a little too tight. It wasn't the grip of a daughter caring for a mother. It was the grip of a jailer moving a prisoner. And Grandma's whisper from earlier crashed back into my mind. Call Ethan Caldwell. She knew. Somewhere inside that fog of medication and age, she knew they were dismantling her life piece by piece. I finished the cleaning. I washed my hands one last time. I didn't say goodbye to everyone. I didn't want to hug them. I didn't want to touch them. I walked into the living room. "I am heading out," I said to the room at large. "Oh, leaving so soon?" Sloane asked, not looking up from her phone. "Drive safe. Don't hit any deer with that old car of yours." "I won't," I said. My father barely nodded. Gavin didn't look at me at all. I walked out the front door, down the driveway, and into the cold night air. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I reached into my pocket. The $2 lottery ticket was still there. I pulled it out and tossed it onto the passenger seat. They had given it to me as a joke, a reminder of my place, a scrap for the dog. But as I looked at the dark windows of the house, my father's office window specifically, I realized the ticket wasn't a joke anymore. It was the only clean thing I had taken from that house. I started the engine and drove away. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence. When I got back to my condo in Overland Park, I didn't turn on the lights. I locked the door, threw my keys on the table, and sat on my couch in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Gavin's signature next to my father's. I saw the shaky, terrified scrawl of my grandmother's name. I saw the way my mother looked at Grandma, like she was a resource to be mined, rather than a human being to be loved. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who were helpless. I wasn't helpless. I was the landscape architect. I knew how to dig. I knew how to clear the weeds to see the structure underneath. I got up and went to my desk. I opened a fresh notebook. I didn't turn on my laptop yet. I needed to see it in ink. I uncapped a pen and began to write. It wasn't a diary entry. It was an interrogation. 1. Who knows about the loans? Dad and Gavin? Does Mom know? Or is she just happy to spend the money? 2. The house transfer? Mom is the POA. Gavin is the architect of the deal. They are moving assets before the ship sinks. 3. Who is acting? Everyone. Sloane is the distraction. Dad is the desperate face. Gavin is the brain. Mom is the enforcer. I stared at the paper. Then I wrote the final line, circling it 3 times until the paper nearly tore. 4. Who is Ethan Caldwell? I sat back, the pen hovering over the page. The lottery ticket sat on the corner of the desk, unscratched, unnoticed in the shadow of the crimes I had just witnessed. I didn't care about the $2. I cared about the war that had just been declared. They thought they were going on a cruise to celebrate their success. They didn't know they were leaving behind a witness who had just started taking notes. The morning after Thanksgiving did not bring clarity. It brought a gray, heavy sky over Overland Park and a knot in my stomach that coffee could not dissolve. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the list I had written the night before. 4 questions, no answers. The silence in my condo was usually my refuge, but today it felt oppressive. Like the air before a tornado touches down, I needed a human source. Documents were static. They told me what happened, but they didn't tell me how or why. I needed someone who had been in the room when I wasn't. I picked up my phone and scrolled past my mother's contact, past Sloane's, past my father's. I stopped at Aunt June. June Carver was my father's younger sister. In the Mitchell family hierarchy, she was considered eccentric because she lived in a small apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and refused to dye her gray hair. But at the dinner yesterday, when Gavin had made his joke about my $2 inheritance, June hadn't laughed. She had looked at me with a sharp, pained expression, then looked down at her plate. It was the look of someone who was watching a car crash in slow motion and was too terrified to scream. I pressed call. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when she answered. "Paisley?" Her voice was tight, breathless. "Hi, Aunt June," I said, keeping my voice level. "I was just thinking about yesterday. I felt like I didn't get a chance to really talk to you." There was a pause on the other end, a long, hesitant silence. "It was a lot," she said finally. "Your mother certainly knows how to throw a party." "She does," I agreed. I decided to push, just a little. "I was wondering if you wanted to grab coffee. I have the day off. Maybe we could meet halfway?" "I don't know. Honey, I have errands. I visited Grandma Eloise's house in my head yesterday." I lied smoothly. "I was thinking about her garden. I wanted to ask you about the hydrangeas she used to plant. You are the only one who remembers." Another pause. Then, her voice dropped an octave. "Paisley, where are you right now?" "I am at home." "Are you alone?" "Yes. Meet me at the Daily Grind on 119th Street, the one in the back corner of the shopping center, not the one by the highway." "Okay," I said, my pulse quickening. "I can be there in 30 minutes. And Paisley," she added, her voice trembling slightly, "do not say anything else over the phone, and do not trust Gavin." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My aunt was not a dramatic woman. She was a retired librarian who knitted blankets for shelter cats. For her to sound like a whistleblower in a spy novel meant the rot went deeper than I thought. I showered and dressed in 5 minutes. I didn't wear my usual work boots and jeans. I put on a nondescript gray sweater and black trousers. I felt like I was going undercover in my own life. The Daily Grind was a cavernous, dimly lit coffee shop that smelled of burnt beans and damp coats. It was perfect. I found June sitting in a booth at the very back, hidden behind a decorative plastic ficus tree. She was clutching a paper cup with both hands, staring at the steam rising from the lid. I slid into the seat opposite her. "June." She jumped slightly, then looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "You look like your grandmother," she said abruptly. "Everyone says you look like Dale, but you don't. You have Eloise's eyes. That is probably why it bothers Caroline so much." "Aunt June," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Why did you tell me not to trust Gavin? What is going on?" She looked around the shop, checking the nearby tables. They were empty. She leaned in. "You saw the ticket," she whispered. "The lottery ticket. That was cruel. But it wasn't just cruel. Paisley, it was a distraction." "I know about the loans," I said. I played my card early. I needed her to know I wasn't fishing. I was confirming. "I know Dad is in over his head. I saw the papers." June's face went pale. "You saw? How?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "I know Gavin co-signed. I know the interest rates are insane. What I don't understand is why Gavin would do that. He's a financial advisor. He talks about low-risk yields and long-term growth. Why would he sign a predatory loan with a 25% interest rate?" June let out a bitter, dry laugh. "Financial advisor," she scoffed. "Is that what he calls himself on LinkedIn? Gavin doesn't manage wealth. Paisley, he manages desperation." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Gavin is a facilitator," she explained, her words rushing out now that the dam had broken. "He finds people who are asset-rich but cash-poor, people who have hit a wall, business owners who are drowning. He connects them with private lenders, Hard money lenders. The kind of people who don't care about your credit score because they know they can take your collateral. I felt a chill run down my spine. You mean loan sharks? Corporate loan sharks, she corrected. It is all technically legal. It is all in the fine print. Gavin gets a commission on the loan origination, and he gets a consulting fee for managing the debt. He isn't helping your father get out of the hole. He is the one digging it and charging Dale for the shovel. How long? I asked. Years, June said. Your father has been patching debt with debt since you were in college. The landscaping business? It has been bleeding money for a decade. But Dale, he has too much pride. He couldn't downsize. He couldn't admit he failed. So when Gavin came along and started dating Sloane, it was like a miracle. Gavin knew how to move money around. He knew how to make things look solvent on paper. And the price? Control, June said. Gavin owns him. Every financial move your father makes, Gavin approves it. That is why he is so arrogant at the dinner table. He isn't a guest. He is the landlord. I nodded slowly, the pieces fitting together with a sickening click. And now they have run out of Dad's assets, I said softly. So they are coming for Grandma's. June flinched. She picked up her coffee cup, her hand shaking enough to ripple the surface of the liquid. The house, she murmured. I saw a deed transfer, I said, keeping my voice low, and a power of attorney, signed October 14th. June closed her eyes. A tear leaked out and tracked through the powder on her cheek. I was there, she whispered, at the hospital, October 14th. I leaned forward. Tell me. Eloise was bad that week, June said. The new medication made her confused. She didn't know where she was. She thought she was back in 1970. I went to visit her in the afternoon. When I got to the room, the door was closed. I heard Caroline's voice. What was she saying? She was saying, "Just sign it, Mom. It is for your medical bills. We have to pay the doctors so they will let you go home." She kept repeating it. "Sign it so we can take you home." And Grandma? She was crying, June said, her voice cracking. She kept saying she wanted to go home. She didn't understand she was signing the home away. I opened the door just a crack. I saw Caroline holding the pen in Eloise's hand. She was guiding it on the paper, and Gavin, he was standing by the window, just watching. He held the clipboard. "You didn't stop them," I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. "I was scared," June admitted, looking down at her hands. "Caroline, you know how she is. She told me to get out. She said it was a private family matter. Later, she told me if I said anything, they would put Eloise in a state facility. The bad kind. She said they were doing this to afford private care. I wanted to believe her, Paisley. I wanted to believe they were doing it for Mom. They are doing it for a cruise," I said coldly, "and to pay off Dad's debts." "They are going to sell it," June said. "Gavin has a buyer lined up, a developer. They are going to tear it down and put up condos. They need the title clear by January." I sat back in the booth. The anger I felt wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was absolute. "Thank you, June," I said. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her skin was dry and cold. "What are you going to do? You can't fight them. Gavin has lawyers. He has paperwork. If you make a scene, they will destroy you. They will say you are jealous. They will cut you off." "I know," I said. I squeezed her hand gently, then pulled away. "I am not going to make a scene. I am going to go home and water my plants." I left her there in the coffee shop. I needed to be alone. The drive back to my condo was a blur. I didn't see the road. I saw the image of my mother forcing a pen into my grandmother's trembling hand. I saw Gavin standing by the window, checking his watch, calculating his commission on the betrayal. When I got inside my apartment, I locked the door and threw the deadbolt. I walked into the living room. The lottery ticket was still there. It was sitting on the coffee table where I had tossed it the night before. The holiday lucky sevens. It looked ridiculous. a piece of cardboard promising false hope to the desperate. I sat down on the sofa. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't turn on the lights. The afternoon sun was slanting through the blinds, creating bars of light and shadow across the floor. I picked up the ticket. I reached for a penny from the bowl on the table. It was a tarnished Lincoln penny. I held the ticket steady on my knee and began to scratch. The scratching sound was loud in the silent room. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I uncovered the winning numbers first. 4, 11, 23, 42, 9. Then I moved to the bottom row. Your numbers? The first spot was a cherry. Nothing. The second was a bell. Nothing. The third was the number 4. I paused. A match. The prize amount below it was small. $50. Okay. $50 was gas money. I kept scratching. The next number was 11. Match. Prize. $50. The next was 23. Match. Prize. $100. My heart did a strange, stuttering flip. This was unusual. Usually, you win once, maybe twice. I scratched the next one. 42. Match. Prize. $1,000. I stopped. I brushed the gray latex dust off the card. I stared at it. I had 4 matches. I moved to the last line, the grand prize box. It was separate, highlighted by a graphic of a bursting star. I scratched it slowly. I revealed the number, 9. It matched the last winning number. I scratched the prize amount below it. I expected to see $500, maybe $5,000 if the universe was feeling ironic. I scratched the first digit, a 1, then a 0, then another 0, then a comma, 0, 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. I stopped breathing. I sat there, frozen, the penny slipping from my sweaty fingers and falling onto the carpet. I looked at the number. I counted the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, $100 million. It wasn't possible. It was a misprint. It was a prank ticket Gavin had bought at a joke shop to humiliate me further. That had to be it. He was waiting for me to call him, screaming with joy, so he could laugh and say, "Read the fine print, Paisley." I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it twice before I could unlock it. I opened the state lottery app. I didn't log in. I just went to the check ticket function. It asked for access to my camera. I allowed it. I smoothed the ticket out on the table. I hovered the phone over the barcode at the bottom. The camera tried to focus. It blurred, then sharpened. A green box appeared on the screen. Congratulations. Verified winner. Jackpot claim. Amount, $100 million. Cash, option, $58 million. I stared at the screen. The letters were crisp, bright, undeniable. I closed the app. I took a deep breath. I opened the browser on my phone and went to the official state lottery website. I typed in the serial number manually, digit by digit, checking each one 3 times. Enter, the same result. Jackpot winner. I put the phone down. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and dance. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I felt gravity increase. I felt the room shrink, the walls pressing in. I felt a sudden, profound, terrifying isolation. $100 million. It was enough to buy Northway Green Studio. It was enough to buy the entire neighborhood my parents lived in. It was enough to bury Gavin Rourke in litigation for the next 50 years. I sat there for a long time. The sun moved across the floor, the bars of light shifting, fading as evening approached. I watched the dust motes dance in the air. I was a landscape architect. I worked with the earth. I knew that if you planted a seed in toxic soil, it would die. But if you had enough resources, you didn't just plant a seed. You removed the soil. You excavated. You terraformed. I looked at the ticket one last time, then slid it inside the cover of my phone case. I wasn't Paisley the doormat anymore. I wasn't Paisley the victim. I was a sovereign nation with a GDP larger than some small countries. But money was dangerous. Money was blood in the water. And I was swimming with sharks. Gavin would smell it. My father would smell it. If they knew, They would descend on me. They would guilt me, sue me, gaslight me. They would say the ticket was a family gift, that it belonged to the community pot. I needed armor. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkening room. I didn't search for mansions for sale. I didn't search for luxury cars. I typed into the search bar, my fingers moving with deliberate precision. Lottery winner steps to protect identity. I hit enter. I read the first result. Then I typed again. Best estate lawyers. Kansas. And then, the most important search. Blind trust structure for anonymous assets. I clicked on a link for a law firm in the city, one with 3 names on the door and no flashy advertisements. I found the name of a senior partner who specialized in high net worth protection, Ethan Caldwell. I froze. The name Grandma had whispered. Call Ethan Caldwell. I had assumed he was a doctor, or maybe an old friend. But he was a lawyer, a high-end estate lawyer. My grandmother hadn't just been warning me, she had been giving me the weapon. She had prepared for this. Even in her confusion, she knew she was losing the war, and she had tried to pass the ammunition to the only person she trusted. I looked at the phone number on the screen. It was after hours. I wouldn't call now, but I wrote the number down on a sticky note and pasted it to the center of my screen. $100 million was the fuel, but Ethan Caldwell was the engine, and the ticket was the match. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. My old sedan was sitting there under the street lamp, a dent in the rear bumper. Let them have their cruise. Let them have their champagne and their balcony suites. Let them laugh about the landscape designer and her dirt. I wasn't going to just survive this family. I was going to dismantle it. And then, I was going to build something decent on the empty lot. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate. I sat in my car outside a limestone building in downtown Kansas City, staring at the brass plaque next to the heavy oak doors. Caldwell, Vance Sterling. It did not look like the kind of place that advertised on billboards or daytime television. It looked like the kind of place that handled problems quietly, efficiently, and with devastating finality. I had called the number on the sticky note at exactly 9 o'clock. The receptionist had put me through immediately after I mentioned my grandmother's name. When Ethan Caldwell's voice came on the line, it was deep, gravelly, and devoid of the fake warmth I was used to hearing from Gavin. I had told him who I was. I had told him I had documents regarding Eloise Mitchell. His response had been swift. Do not speak to your family. Do not answer their calls. Come to my office. Now. Is that understood? Yes, I had said. And Paisley, he had added, his voice dropping a decibel. If you have what I think you have, we are not just talking about probate. We are talking about theft. Keep your mouth shut until you are in this room. Now, sitting in the leather chair across from his desk, I felt a strange sense of calm. Ethan Caldwell was a man in his 60s, with silver hair cut with military precision and eyes that seemed to have seen every variety of human greed imaginable. His office smelled of mahogany and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile, chemical smell of my parents' house. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I didn't say a word. I just opened the file containing the photos I had taken in my father's study, the predatory loan agreement, the transfer of deed, and the shaky power of attorney. Ethan put on a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. He leaned forward, studying the screen. The silence in the room was absolute. I watched his jaw muscle tighten as he scrolled. This loan, he said, pointing to the image of the agreement with Gavin and my father's signatures. Apex Capital. I know them. They are bottom feeders. They structure loans designed to default, so they can seize the collateral. 25% interest. He looked up at me. Your father is not just in debt. Miss Mitchell, he is drowning, and he has tied a cinder block to his ankles. I know, I said. But look at the next file. The deed transfer. Ethan clicked to the next image. He stared at the signature line for a long time. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. October 14th, he read aloud. That date is significant. She was in the hospital, I said, my voice steady. She was on heavy sedatives. My Aunt June saw my mother guiding her hand. She said Grandma thought she was signing medical release forms to go home. Ethan sat back in his chair, taking off his glasses. He looked tired. But beneath the fatigue, there was a sharp, cold anger. "This is not a signature," he said, tapping the screen. "This is a tremor. A forensic handwriting analyst would tear this apart in 5 minutes. A power of attorney executed while the principal is incapacitated is void ab initio. From the beginning, it is fraud." He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet behind his desk. He unlocked it with a key from his pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored folder. "I have been waiting for this," he said. "I have been waiting for them to make a move." "You knew?" I asked. "Eloise came to me 4 years ago," Ethan said, placing the folder on the desk. "She was lucid then, sharp as a tack. She told me she was worried. She said Caroline, your mother, had started asking too many questions about the house title. She said Gavin had started bringing around papers for her to look at, hiding them in stacks of magazines." He opened the folder. Inside were documents signed in a firm, clear hand. "Your grandmother established a trust. Paisley. The Eloise Mitchell Protection Trust. She moved the majority of her liquid assets into it years ago. Not the house. She refused to move the house because she was afraid it would trigger an investigation by your mother if the tax bill changed names. But the rest? It is safe." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she wanted to protect you," Ethan said softly. "She told me. Paisley is the only one who loves me, not what I can give her. If they know she has money, they will break her. She wanted this trust to be a safety net for you when she passed. It is not a fortune. Paisley, it is about $200,000, but it is yours, and they cannot touch it. $200,000. To the Paisley of 2 days ago, that would have been life-changing. It would have meant paying off my mortgage. It was a fortune of love. Proof that she had seen me." "She knew," I whispered. "She knew they would come for her." "She knew," Ethan affirmed. "And she made me the executor, but we have a problem. The house was not in the trust, and based on these photos, they have used a fraudulent power of attorney to transfer the title to your mother. Once it is in Caroline's name, Gavin can use it as collateral for his loans, or sell it. They are going to sell it," I said. "To a developer. June told me." Ethan nodded grimly. "We have 2 options. Option 1, we file for an emergency injunction, we freeze the assets, we go to court next week and claim elder abuse. It will be public, it will be messy, your parents will fight it, and they will drag your name through the mud. And option 2? "Option 2, Ethan said, leaning forward. "We prepare the case. We let them think they have won. We let them file the papers. We let them commit to the sale. And then, once the paper trail is undeniable, once they have incriminated themselves beyond a shadow of a doubt, we drop the hammer. We file a suit to void the transfer and remove Caroline as the power of attorney. I want the second option," I said immediately. "I want them to feel safe. I want them to be on that cruise ship, drinking their champagne, thinking they got away with it." Ethan looked at me with new respect. "That requires patience, and it requires resources. Legal battles like this are expensive. Gavin will use your father's money to fight you until the estate is drained." I reached into my bag again. I pulled out the lottery ticket. It was inside a plastic sleeve now. I slid it across the mahogany desk. "I don't think resources will be a problem," I said. Ethan looked at the ticket. He looked at the winner claim form I had printed out but not signed. He looked at the numbers. He didn't gasp. He didn't blink. He simply looked up at me, and for the first time, a small, terrifying smile touched his lips. $100 million, he said. It wasn't a question. "Cash option is $58 million, I corrected him. "After taxes, maybe 35 or 40 million. But yes, enough." Ethan picked up the ticket as if it were a holy relic. "Does anyone know? Your family?" "They gave it to me," I said. "As a joke, they think it is a $2 piece of trash. They have no idea. Ethan let out a low whistle. Karma, he murmured. It is a rare thing to see it in real time. He set the ticket down and clasped his hands. The gladiator was putting on his armor. Okay, he said, his voice brisk and businesslike. Here is how we do this. If you claim this in your own name, it becomes public record. Journalism is lazy, but they will find you, and once they find you, Gavin finds you, and once Gavin finds you, he will claim that since the ticket was a gift, it belongs to the family pool. He will sue you. He will lose, but he will tie this money up for years. I don't want them to know, I said. Not yet. I don't care about the fame. I just want the power to stop them. Then we create a blind trust, Ethan said, pulling a legal pad toward him. We form a limited liability company with a nondescript name. The LLC claims the ticket. You are the sole beneficiary of the trust that owns the LLC. Your name appears nowhere on the Lottery Commission's press release. A representative, me, will collect the check. Can we do that? In Kansas? Yes, Ethan said. We can protect your anonymity. We will call the LLC something generic. Blue Sky Holdings, the Granite Group, something that sounds boring. Call it the Hydrangea Trust, I said. Ethan paused, pen hovering. Hydrangea? It is the flower I grow, I said. The one my mother made fun of, the one Grandma loved. It changes color depending on the soil. Acid or alkaline, it adapts. Ethan nodded. The Hydrangea Trust? I like it. He wrote it down. So, he continued, here is the timeline. I will draft the trust documents today. We will file for the LLC tomorrow. We claim the prize on Thursday. The money will be wired to a secure account by early next week. In the meantime, I will hire a private investigator to pull the official property records for your grandmother's house and get sworn statements from the hospital staff about her condition on October 14th. And the family? I asked. They leave for the cruise on December 5th. Let them go, Ethan said. Let them leave the country. It is actually better for us. If they are in international waters, they cannot easily respond to legal filings. We will have the element of surprise. He looked me in the eye. But you have to play the part. Paisley, you have to go back to being the dutiful daughter. You have to answer their texts. You have to let them treat you like dirt for one more week. Can you do that? I thought about the way Gavin had smirked. I thought about my mother's dismissive wave. I thought about the $2 ticket. I can do it, I said. Ethan stood up and extended his hand. Ms. Mitchell, you just became my most important client. But remember one thing. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, solid. What is that? Money gives you power, Ethan said. It gives you options. It buys the best lawyers and the best investigators. But the money is not the weapon. The documentation is the weapon. The money just buys you the hammer to swing it. Do not confuse the two. We are going to win this because they were sloppy, arrogant, and criminal, not just because you are rich. I understand, I said. Good, he said. Now, go home. Go to work. Be invisible. And if Gavin calls you to ask for $20, tell him you don't have it. I walked out of the office and back into the gray morning. The wind was colder now, biting through my sweater, but I didn't feel it. I felt a strange warmth in my chest. I had walked in there as a daughter looking for help. I was walking out as the CEO of a retribution machine. I got into my car and checked my phone. There was a text from Sloan. Hey, Mom said you left early without saying goodbye. Rude. Anyway, can you come over this weekend and water my plants while we are gone? The housekeeper charges too much. I stared at the screen. The old Paisley would have felt a sting of resentment. The old Paisley would have typed out a polite excuse. The new Paisley, the sole beneficiary of the Hydrangea Trust, just smiled. Sure, I typed back. I would love to help. I hit send. Let them think I was still the servant. It would make it so much sweeter when they realized I was actually the owner of the estate. The nursing home was called The Meadows, a name that suggested rolling green fields and sunlight, but the reality was a brick box situated behind a strip mall on the edge of town. It wasn't a terrible place. It was clean, and the staff were polite. But it was a place where people were stored, not where they lived. As I walked down the long, linoleum-tiled hallway, the smell hit me. It was that specific, suffocating cocktail of industrial lavender cleaner, boiled vegetables, and the faint, underlying scent of old age. It was the smell of waiting. My parents called this assisted living. They told their friends they had moved Grandma here because she needed specialized care that they couldn't provide at home. But after what I had seen in my father's desk, I knew the truth. This wasn't about care. It was about warehousing the obstacle while they liquidated her assets. I reached room 304 and paused at the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of the oxygen machine I could hear inside. I took a deep breath, composed my face, and pushed the door open. Grandma Eloise was sitting in the armchair by the window. The afternoon light was washing over her, turning her silver hair into a halo. She was looking out at the parking lot, her hands resting still in her lap. Usually, when I visited, she was drifting, her mind untethered by the dementia and the medication, floating somewhere between 1980 and yesterday. But when she turned her head, her eyes were sharp. There was no fog today, no confusion. She looked at me with a terrifying clarity. The kind that sometimes comes to people when they sense the stakes have changed. "Paisley," she said. Her voice was stronger than it had been at Thanksgiving. I walked over and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. Her skin felt like dry parchment, fragile and cool, but her grip was surprisingly firm. "Hi, Grandma," I said softly. "How are you feeling today?" She ignored the pleasantry. She leaned forward, her gaze locking onto mine. "Did you do it? Did you call Ethan?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw him yesterday." Eloise let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging as if a heavy weight had been lifted from them. She closed her eyes for a moment. "Good, good. He is a good man. He listens." "He told me about the trust," I said, keeping my voice low so the nurses in the hall wouldn't hear. "He told me you put money aside for me years ago. Grandma, why didn't you tell me?" She opened her eyes and smiled, a sad, weary expression. "Because if you knew, you might have tried to help them. You have a soft heart. Paisley, you always have. You would have given it to your father to fix his mistakes, or let Sloan talk you out of it. I had to keep it safe. I had to keep you safe." I felt a sting of tears in my eyes, even when her mind was failing. She had been plotting to protect me. "I found the papers, Grandma," I said. "In Dad's office, the loan agreement with Gavin, and the deed transfer for your house." At the mention of the house, Eloise's face tightened. A shadow passed over her features, a mixture of fear and shame. She pulled her hands away from mine and looked back out the window. "I didn't want to sign it," she whispered. Her voice was trembling now. "I know," I said fiercely. "I know you didn't. Aunt June told me. She saw them at the hospital." Eloise nodded slowly, piecing together the memory shards. "It was loud. My head was so loud that day. The doctors gave me something that made the room spin. And then Caroline was there. She was holding a pen. She kept tapping the paper. Tap, tap, tap." She mimicked the motion with a shaking finger on the arm of the chair. She told me, "Mother, sign this so we can pay the doctors. Sign this so we can take care of you. Don't you want us to take care of you?" Eloise's voice broke. "I was scared. Paisley, I thought if I didn't sign, they would leave me there, in the dark." Rage boiled in my chest, hot and acidic. They had weaponized her fear. They had used her vulnerability as a leverage point to steal the one thing she loved, her home. It wasn't just theft. It was psychological torture. "They are not going to take your home," I said. My voice was steady, hard as iron. "I promise you, they are never going to sell that house." Eloise looked at me, confused. "But they have the paper. Ethan said without money to fight." I reached into my pocket. I didn't have the ticket. It was safely locked in Ethan's safe, but I had the image of it burned into my retina. "Grandma," I said, "you know how they gave me that lottery ticket at Thanksgiving? The $2 scratch-off?" She let out a dry chuckle. "A cruel joke, just like them." "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It won." She looked at me, waiting for the punchline. $50? Did you buy yourself a nice dinner?" "No," I said. I leaned in closer, until our foreheads were almost touching. "I won the jackpot, Grandma, $100 million. The room went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss-click of the oxygen machine and the distant murmur of a television down the hall. Eloise stared at me. She blinked once, twice. She searched my face for any sign of deception. When she saw none, her eyes widened, not with greed, but with shock. "100 million?" she repeated, enunciating every syllable. "Yes." She sat back in her chair. She looked at her hands, then at the sterile room, then back at me, and then she started to laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was a soft, wheezing sound, shaking her frail chest. It was the laugh of someone who sees the cosmic absurdity of the universe. "Oh, my." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "God certainly has a sense of humor, doesn't he? And a sense of timing." "It is enough to fix everything," I said. "It is enough to stop the sale. Enough to hire the best lawyers. Enough to get you out of here." I took her hands again. "That is why I came. I wanted you to know. I am going to buy the house back. Or, I am going to stop the transfer. Ethan has a plan. And then, I am going to bring you home. I am going to hire nurses. The nice ones. Who cook and read to you. You are going back to your garden. Grandma, you are going to see your hydrangeas bloom this spring." I expected her to be thrilled. I expected her to start planning. But Eloise stopped laughing. Her expression turned serious, almost stern. She gripped my hands tight, her fingernails digging into my skin. "Paisley," she said, "listen to me. I am listening. You have the money now," she said. "You have the power, but you must be careful. Money is like water. It can nourish, or it can drown." She looked deep into my eyes. "Do not let this money turn you into them." I froze. "I would never—" "You think you wouldn't," she interrupted. "But hate is a powerful fuel. You are angry. You have every right to be angry. I see it in your jaw. I see it in how you hold your shoulders. You want to hurt them. You want to crush Gavin. You want to make Caroline cry." I looked down. She was right. Part of me did want that. Part of me wanted to stand on the deck of their cruise ship and scream the truth until they shattered. "If you use this money just for revenge," Eloise said softly, "you will become just as ugly as they are. You will be another Mitchell fighting over scraps. Just with a bigger knife. Don't do that. You are better than that. You are the one who grows things." "Then what do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Just let them get away with it?" "No," she said firmly. "You stop them. You protect what is yours. But you do it with the truth. You don't need to scream. You don't need to play their games. You just turn on the lights." Turn on the lights. I thought about the dark corners of my father's office. I thought about the hidden files, the secret accounts, the lies told in hushed tones. They thrived in the dark. They relied on the shadows to hide their rot. "Okay," I said. "I will turn on the lights. Promise me," she said. "Promise me you will live a good life, a free life, not a life spent looking over your shoulder to see if they are miserable enough." "I promise," I said. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands in the quiet room. The sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the floor. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the lonely, awkward girl at the end of the table. I felt connected. I felt anchored. When the nurse came in to bring her dinner, a tray of gray meat and instant mashed potatoes, I stood up. "I have to go, Grandma," I said. "I have work to do, but I will be back." And soon, I am taking you home." She smiled at me, tired but peaceful. "Go," she said. "And Paisley? Buy yourself a new coat. That one looks thin." I walked out of the room and down the long hallway. I walked past the nurse's station, past the other residents sitting in their wheelchairs. I stepped out the automatic doors into the parking lot. The air was cold and crisp. The streetlights were flickering on. I looked at my car. It was old. It was rusted. But it was mine. I realized then that the war I was about to fight wasn't about the $100 million. It wasn't even really about the house. It was about dignity. My parents and my sister had spent my entire life trying to define me. They told me I was small. They told me I was unsuccessful. They told me I was a gardener who played in the dirt while they reached for the stars. Grandma Eloise hadn't just given me advice. She had given me permission. Permission to step out of the role they had written for me. I wasn't fighting to defeat them. That was Gavin's game. That was a zero-sum game where someone had to lose for someone else to win. I was fighting to reclaim my life. I unlocked my car door and sat in the driver's seat. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked different. They didn't look scared anymore. I started the engine. I had a lot to do before the cruise ship departed. I had to meet with Ethan. I had to sign the trust documents. I had to set the trap. But I wasn't doing it out of hate. Not anymore. I was doing it because the truth was a seed. And for the first time in 34 years, I finally had the water to make it grow. I put the car in gear and drove out of the parking lot. Leaving the smell of waiting behind me, I wasn't waiting anymore. The Bon Voyage party was not really a party. It was a mobilization effort disguised as a social gathering, held in the living room of my parents' house 24 hours before their flight to Florida. The air was thick with the smell of expensive leather luggage and the frantic energy of people trying to outrun their own anxieties. I had been invited, of course, but the invitation had come with a bulleted list of tasks attached. "Paisley, check the luggage tags. Paisley, make sure the car service is confirmed for 6 in the morning. Paisley, rearrange those lilies in the foyer. They look wilted." My mother, Caroline, was conducting the chaos like a maestro. She was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my car insurance, flitting between the kitchen and the living room, checking her reflection in every available surface. "I just want everything to be perfect," she announced to the room. Though she was really speaking to the reflection of herself she hoped to see. "We deserve this relaxation. It has been such a stressful year." I stood by the kitchen island, cross-referencing a packing list. "The car is confirmed. Mom, a Suburban. It will be here at 6. "Good," she said, not looking at me. "And the cat sitter? Did you leave the key under the mat for her?" Yes, I was playing my role perfectly. I was the obedient daughter, the one who lived in the background, the one whose time had no value. But while my hands were busy folding napkins and checking flight confirmation numbers, my eyes were recording everything. I wasn't looking at the luggage. I was looking at the people. Gavin was standing by the fireplace, nursing a tumbler of bourbon. It was only 4 in the afternoon. He was wearing his casual rich uniform, loafers with no socks, pressed chinos, a polo shirt, but the easy confidence he usually projected was cracking at the edges. I watched him check his phone every 30 seconds. He wasn't just checking the time. He was checking emails. He was checking alerts. His thumb moved across the screen with a jerky, nervous rhythm. Every time his phone buzzed, his shoulders tensed up near his ears before he forced them back down. I walked over to him, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres I had just plated. "Crab cake? Gavin?" He jumped slightly, then looked down at me with that familiar, pitying smile. "Ah, Paisley, always serving. Thank you." He took a crab cake and popped it into his mouth. He didn't chew it so much as demolish it. "You know," he said, gesturing with his glass, "I was looking at your car in the driveway, that sedan. How many miles are on it now? 200,000? 180,000, I corrected him mildly. "You really should think about upgrading," he lectured. His voice was loud enough for my father to hear across the room. I could set you up with a lease plan. Or better yet, we could sit down and look at your portfolio. If you have a portfolio, you need to make your money work for you. Paisley, you can't just trade hours for dollars your whole life. That is the trap of the working class. He was doing it again. He was using me as a prop to assert his own dominance. To reassure himself that he was the alpha male in the room, he needed to feel superior because, deep down, he knew the ground beneath his feet was crumbling. I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. I appreciate the advice, Gavin, but I think I am okay for now. Who knows? Maybe luck will teach me what finance cannot. Gavin laughed. A sharp, barking sound. Luck is for fools. Paisley, wealth is built on strategy. It is built on leverage. Leverage, I repeated. The word hung in the air between us. I knew exactly what he was leveraging. My grandmother's house, my father's credit, his own future. Yes, leverage, he said, turning away to refill his drink. You will understand one day. Maybe. Sloane breezed into the room, holding up a stack of bikinis she had just unpacked and repacked for the third time. Do you think this is too much for the pool deck? She asked no one in particular. You look stunning in everything, honey, my father said from his armchair. He looked tired. He was staring at the television, but the screen was black. He was just staring at the reflection of the room. Sloane turned to me. She held the bikini up against her body. I am so ready for the spa, she sighed. They have this seaweed wrap treatment that costs $300, but Gavin said to book whatever I want. We are in the owner's suite, so we get priority booking. She looked at my outfit, jeans and a plain black t-shirt. I guess you are lucky you don't have to worry about all this packing, she said, tilting her head. You are so much better suited for staying home, you know? With your plants. It is quiet, simple. That is more your speed. It was an insult wrapped in a compliment. The Mitchell family special. A week ago. It would have stung. It would have made me feel small and uninteresting. Now, it just sounded like noise. You are right, Sloane, I said, smiling. I am going to have a very quiet week. I have some big projects I need to tend to. Well, don't work too hard, she said, tossing the bikini back into her open suitcase. Water my ferns, okay? And don't let the mail pile up. I won't, I said. I excused myself and went into the kitchen. I needed to send the signal. My phone was in my back pocket. I pulled it out and opened the encrypted messaging app Ethan had insisted I install. I typed 8 words. They leave town tomorrow. Execute step 1. I hit send. Next, I opened the county clerk's online portal. Ethan had walked me through this process in his office. I logged in and navigated to the property alert system. I entered the parcel number for 1402 Maplewood Drive, Grandma's house. I set up an instant notification trigger. Alert me if title transfer, lien filing, mortgage recording, power of attorney filing. I entered my email address and my phone number. Confirm. The trap was set. If Gavin or my mother tried to file the deed transfer, they had coerced Grandma into signing. I would know the second it hit the system. And because they were going to be on a ship in the middle of the Caribbean, they wouldn't know that I knew. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked back out to the living room. Okay, I said, clapping my hands together gently. The checklists are done. The car is confirmed. Is there anything else you need before I head out? Just lock the back door on your way out, my mother said, not looking up from her iPad. And Paisley? Try to visit Grandma Eloise while we are gone. She gets confused when we are away. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I will, I said. I will take very good care of her. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back at the house. I got into my car and drove. But I didn't drive to my condo. 3 days ago, I had signed a lease on a short-term rental in a high-security building in downtown Kansas City. It was a corporate apartment, fully furnished, registered under the LLC that Ethan had created, the Hydrangea Trust. I drove there now. I parked in the underground garage, using a keycard that had no name on it. I took the elevator up to the 14th floor. The apartment was stark. modern, and silent. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city lights. It didn't smell like old regrets or passive-aggressive insults. It smelled like nothing. It smelled like a blank slate. I had brought 2 bags with me, my clothes, my laptop, and my most important documents. I was ghosting my own life. I sat on the beige sofa and looked at the city. I was cutting the cords. I had forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I had set my work email to an autoresponder, telling clients I was taking a sabbatical for personal development. I wasn't Paisley the landscape designer anymore. I was the architect of a demolition. I slept soundly that night. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about trying to scream with no voice. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7 o'clock. It was the day of their departure. They would be at the airport now, checking bags, getting ready to board the flight to Miami where the ship was docked. I picked up the phone. It was a text from Sloan. "Hey P. So, super awkward. We are at the check-in counter and my card is doing that weird fraud alert thing because we are traveling. Gavin is on the phone with the bank, but the line is super long and we need to pay for the extra luggage weight like right now, or we might miss the baggage cutoff. Can you Venmo me $500 really quick? I will pay you back as soon as we get on the ship. Please hurry." I stared at the screen. $500. My sister, who was going on a $13,000 cruise, who was staying in the owner's suite, who had bragged about a $300 seaweed wrap, was asking her poor sister for $500 at the airport check-in. It wasn't a fraud alert. Their cards were maxed out. They were living on such a razor-thin margin that a baggage fee was enough to topple the structure. Gavin hadn't unlocked the funds from the loan yet because the house title hadn't cleared. They were flying to a luxury vacation on fumes. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. They were vulnerable. They were terrified. I typed my reply slowly. "I am so sorry. Sloan, I don't have it. My mortgage just went through and I am overdrawn until payday. You should ask Gavin to use one of his other cards." I hit send. I watched the 3 little dots appear, disappear, appear again, then silence. She didn't text back to say, "It's okay." She didn't text back to say, "Thanks anyway." They were scrambling. I could imagine the scene at the airport. Gavin sweating in his cashmere sweater, yelling at a bank teller over the phone. Sloan crying because she might have to leave a suitcase behind. My mother trying to maintain her dignity while declining a credit card transaction. They were beginning to panic, but they were panicking about money. Not once in the last 24 hours had anyone asked me how I was. Not once had they asked if I was okay being alone for the holidays. They only reached out when they needed labor or liquidity. I put the phone down on the glass coffee table. "Bon voyage," I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was rising over Kansas City, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was going to be a beautiful day. I had a meeting with the private investigators at 10 o'clock. Then I had a lunch with Ethan to sign the final papers for the LLC. My family was sailing into a storm, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to get wet. I was the one controlling the weather. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after my family had boarded the Royal Caribbean Jubilee. I was sitting in the sterile, beige living room of the corporate apartment Ethan had secured for me, drinking black coffee and watching the local Kansas City news station on a muted television. The ticker at the bottom of the screen turned red. Breaking news. I unmuted the TV. The anchor, a woman with stiff hair and a practiced, serious expression, looked into the camera. "The Kansas Lottery Commission has announced that the winner of the historic Thanksgiving Super Lotto jackpot has come forward," she said. "The prize, valued at $100 million, was claimed yesterday by a blind trust, while the identity of the winner remains anonymous. Officials have confirmed the winning ticket was purchased at the Quick Stop on the corner of Elm and 4th Street in Overland Park." I took a sip of coffee. The Quick Stop on Elm and 4th. That was the convenience store 3 blocks from my parents' house. It was the place where my father stopped every single morning to buy his newspaper and his scratch-offs. It was where he had purchased the joke gift that was currently sitting in a safety deposit box under the name the Hydrangea Trust. I placed my mug down on the coaster. I looked at my phone. It was sitting on the coffee table. Screen black. Silent. I counted backward from 10. 9. 8. 7. At 6. The screen lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from the Mitchell Hive, the family group chat I had been muted in for years but never removed from. Uncle Jerry. Did you guys see the news? Someone won the big one right in our backyard. Cousin Mike. Elm and Fourth? Isn't that where Uncle Dale buys his smokes? Aunt June. Oh my goodness. That is close. I watched the messages roll in. It was idle chatter at first, the kind of breathless speculation that happens when lightning strikes nearby. But then, the tone shifted. Sloan. Wait. Dad bought the joke tickets there. I was with him in the car. He bought 10 of them. Sloan. He gave one to Paisley. The chat went silent for a full 2 minutes. I could practically feel the radio waves stretching from Kansas to the Caribbean, carrying the sudden, heavy realization that was hitting my sister in her luxury cabin. Then, the bubbles appeared again. Sloan. Paisley. You checked that ticket, right? The $2 one? Cousin Mike. LOL, imagine if Paisley is the millionaire. Gavin. The odds are 1 in 14 million. Let's not get carried away. But the seed was planted. I didn't reply. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. I went to the kitchen and made myself a piece of toast. I buttered it slowly, deliberately. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a direct message. It was my mother. Caroline. Caroline. Hi, sweetie. Hope you are doing okay back home. We are having a lovely time, though the food is a bit rich for my stomach. Listen, silly question, everyone is talking about the lottery news. You didn't happen to throw away that little scratch-off Dad gave you, did you? I read the message twice. Sweetie, she hadn't called me that since I was 6 years old. The casual tone was so forced it was brittle. She was trying to sound breezy, but I could hear the underlying frequency of panic. I didn't answer immediately. I let her wait. I let her stare at her phone screen in the middle of the ocean, wondering if I was asleep, or working, or, most terrifyingly, ignoring her. An hour passed. The group chat was now a frenzy of speculation. Uncle Jerry was posting links to the news story. Sloan was tagging me repeatedly. Sloan. Paisley? Are you there? Sloan. Answer your phone. Finally. At noon. I picked up the phone. I opened my mother's message thread. I typed one word. Yes. I didn't elaborate. I didn't say yes, I kept it, or yes, I checked it. Just yes. The reaction was instantaneous. My phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed Mom. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 5 seconds later, Mom. I let it ring again. Then Dad. Then Sloan. Then Gavin. The phone vibrated and danced across the glass coffee table like a possessed thing. I sat on the couch and watched it. It was a symphony of desperation. In the span of 30 minutes, I received 24 calls. By the end of the afternoon, the count was 79. 79 times they tried to reach the daughter they had ignored for 3 decades. 79 times they tried to bridge the gap they had created. Not because they missed me, but because they smelled money. I didn't answer a single one. I scrolled through the voicemails. Most were frantic, breathless. Paisley, pick up. It is an emergency. Paisley, we need to talk. But there was one from Gavin. It had come in at 3 o'clock. I pressed play and held the phone up to the recorder on my laptop. I needed this saved. I needed this for Ethan. Paisley, Gavin's voice was smooth, but there was a crack in the veneer. I could hear the wind in the background. They were on the deck. Hey, look, we are just worried about you. With this news, things could get complicated. If that ticket is what we think it is, you need protection. You need a team. I have been thinking about your portfolio. And we can structure this so it stays in the family. Tax shelters, LLCs, family helping family. Right? Don't sign anything until you talk to me. We are a team. Call me back. Family helping family. I stopped the recording. I saved the file as evidence_Gavin_coercion_01. He was already trying to claim ownership. He wasn't congratulating me. He was positioning himself as the manager. He wanted to structure it, which meant he wanted to control it. My phone pinged with a secure message from Ethan. Ethan, the paperwork for the injunction is ready. We have the affidavits from the hospital staff regarding your grandmother's condition. We are ready to file the moment you give the signal. How are they reacting? I typed back. Paisley. They are melting down. 79 calls. They know it is me. Or they are 99% sure. They are terrified. Ethan. Good. Fear makes them sloppy. Keep the pressure on. Do not answer. Make them come to you. I looked at the darkening sky outside the window. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical. I was a surgeon standing over a patient, scalpel in hand, deciding where to make the cut to drain the infection. I decided to twist the knife a little deeper. I opened Instagram. I rarely posted. And when I did, it was usually close-ups of plants or landscape designs. My family barely followed me. Sloan had once told me my feed was boring and dirty. I opened my camera roll. I found a photo I had taken months ago. It was a simple shot of Grandma Eloise's house, taken from the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun was hitting the front porch, illuminating the peeling paint and the overgrown azaleas. It looked lonely. It looked waiting. I uploaded the photo to my story. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't mention the lottery. I wrote a single line of text over the image. The most important project of my life. Bringing someone home. I posted it. Then I waited. Social media is a surveillance tool for the insecure. And my sister was the queen of insecurity. She would be refreshing her feed, looking for distraction from her maxed-out credit cards and her husband's panic. It took 11 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Caroline, I saw your post. That sweet old house. You know, Dad and I were just talking about how much we love it. We should renovate it together, as a family project. We love you so much. Paisley, you are such a visionary. I read the words visionary and love and felt a wave of nausea. A week ago, I was the girl who played with plants. Now, I was a visionary. The only thing that had changed was the balance of my bank account, or at least, the rumor of it. Their greed was so transparent it was almost insulting. They didn't even try to hide the pivot. They just assumed I was stupid enough to believe the sudden affection was real. I looked at the time. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. It was time to set the stage for the final act. I went back to the group chat. It had been silent for an hour, likely because they were all huddled in a cabin strategizing on how to handle me. I typed a message. Paisley, I am not answering calls. The signal is bad on your end. I watched the typing bubbles appear instantly from 3 different people. I didn't let them finish. I sent the next message immediately. Paisley, video call. Tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I paused, then added the hook that I knew would drag them in. No matter what dinner reservation or captain's cocktail hour they had planned. Paisley, everyone must be there. We need to discuss the future of the estate. I put the phone down. The future of the estate. To them. That meant the lottery money. It meant how I was going to share it. How Gavin was going to manage it. How Sloan was going to spend it. They would hear estate and think of the $100 million. They wouldn't realize I was talking about the other estate, the one they had stolen, the house on Maplewood Drive. I stood up and walked to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. I was about to walk into a virtual room with the people who had raised me, the people who were supposed to protect me, and I was going to destroy them. But as I dried my face, I remembered Grandma's words, "Turn on the lights." I wasn't destroying them. I was just going to show them exactly who they were, and if the reflection broke them, that was not my fault. I went back to the living room and set up my laptop on the dining table. I positioned the camera so the background was a blank white wall. No clues about where I was, no hints of the luxury apartment, just me, in a plain gray sweater, against a blank canvas. I opened the document Ethan had sent me earlier that day. It was a PDF titled Mitchell_litigation_summary. It contained the timeline of the fraud, the handwriting analysis, the affidavit from Aunt June, and the screenshots of the text messages Sloan had sent me asking for money. I arranged the windows on my screen, video chat on the left, evidence on the right. I checked the time, 7:55, 5 minutes. My heart began to beat faster, a rhythmic thumping in my ears. This was it. The moment I stopped being the doormat, I poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady. At 7:59, the request popped up on my screen. Incoming video call. The Mitchell family. I hovered my mouse over the accept button. I took a deep breath, inhaling the clean, expensive air of my freedom. Showtime, I whispered. I clicked the button. The screen of my laptop was not a window anymore. It was a battlefield. I sat at the dining table in the silent, corporate apartment, watching the digital clock in the corner of my screen tick closer to 8 o'clock. I had not prepared a speech. I had not prepared a tearful monologue about how much they had hurt me or how neglected I felt as a child. Emotions were messy. Emotions were deniable. My mother could explain away my feelings by saying I was too sensitive or remembering it wrong. You cannot explain away a timestamp. You cannot gaslight a bank statement. I had spent the last 2 hours organizing my desktop. I wasn't just dragging files into folders. I was loading ammunition. Ethan had sent over the final evidence packet at 4 in the afternoon, and it was devastating in its precision. I opened the first file, labeled Exhibit A, Financial Insolvency. It was a forensic dismantling of my father's life. It showed the trajectory of the loans, starting 5 years ago with standard bank lines of credit, then moving to high-interest personal loans, and finally bottoming out with the predatory agreement from Apex Capital. Ethan had highlighted the interest rates in yellow, 25%, 30%. It was a mathematical death spiral. I opened the second file, Exhibit B, the fraudulent transfer. This was the smoking gun. Ethan had placed 2 images side by side. On the left was a document my grandmother had signed 3 years ago for the trust. A clear, elegant script, firm and loop-filled. On the right was the power of attorney document signed on October 14th. The signature was a jagged, terrified scrawl. It trailed off the line. It looked like the work of a seismograph recording an earthquake, not a woman consenting to give away her home. Below the images, Ethan had attached the hospital records. October 14th, 2 p.m. Patient administered lorazepam for agitation. Patient is disoriented. Confusing staff for deceased relatives. October 14th, 3:30 p.m. Visitors. Daughter, C. Mitchell. Grandson-in-law, G. Rourke. Present in room. The timeline was absolute. They had forced a woman who didn't know what year it was to sign away the only asset she had left. I minimized the window and looked at the third file. This was the one that made my chest tight, not with fear, but with a cold, righteous sorrow. Affidavit of June Carver. Aunt June had come through. I read her sworn statement again, her words stark and unadorned against the white electronic page. I, June Carver, attest that on the afternoon of October 14th, I witnessed Caroline Mitchell entering Eloise Mitchell's hospital room with a clipboard. I was told to leave. Later that week, I overheard Gavin Rourke speaking to Caroline Mitchell in the hospital hallway. He stated, "We need to get the signature before she stabilizes. That house is the only leverage we have left. Sooner or later, it changes hands anyway. We might as well control the sale." Sooner or later, it changes hands anyway. That was how they saw Grandma. Not as a matriarch, not as a mother, but as an expiring shelf life on a real estate asset. They were just waiting for the inventory to clear. I took a sip of water. My throat felt dry. I wasn't nervous about the confrontation. I was nervous about the sheer magnitude of the demolition I was about to trigger. I had one more file, a folder I had named for Sloan. This wasn't legal evidence. It was a mirror. Sloan was not the mastermind of this scheme. She was too self-absorbed to plan something this complex, but she was a willing beneficiary. She had closed her eyes to the truth, because the lie came with a cruise ticket. I needed to pry her eyes open. Inside the folder were screenshots of Gavin's text messages to his business partner, a woman named Tessa, whom Ethan's investigator had flagged. They weren't romantic texts. They were worse. They were dismissive. Gavin. Sloan is nagging me about the upgrade to the suite. I will put it on the new card once the house title clears. She is a great girl, but she has no concept of what it costs to keep the lights on. Tessa. Just keep her happy until the deal closes. Gavin. That is the plan. She is the perfect cover. No one looks at the finances when the wife is posting vacation photos. I wanted Sloan to see that. I wanted her to see that she wasn't the cherished wife of a successful financier. She was the distraction. She was the shiny object Gavin waved in front of the audience so they wouldn't notice he was picking their pockets. I closed the folders and arranged them on the right side of my screen. I sat back and thought about the strategy. I could have started with the fraud. I could have opened the call by accusing them of elder abuse, but Ethan had advised against it, and I agreed. If you start with the crime, Ethan had said, they will immediately go on the defensive. They will deny. They will shout. They will hang up. You need to lower their guard first. So, I had a different plan. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to give them the money. I was going to confirm the $100 million. I was going to let them taste it. I was going to watch their faces transform from anxiety to euphoria. I wanted to see the greed wash over them like a physical wave. I wanted them to start planning how to spend it. I wanted Gavin to start talking about tax shelters. I wanted my mother to start crying tears of joy. And then, when they were at their highest point, when they felt safe and rich and powerful, I was going to drop the documents. I wanted the contrast to be brutal. I wanted them to feel the whip crack of losing everything in the same breath that they thought they had won it all. It was cruel, it was calculating, and it was exactly what they deserved. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Sloan. Sloan. I looked at the message. Mom is crying. She is really worried about you. Paisley. She thinks you are having a breakdown. Just pick up the call and tell us you are okay. Please, a week ago, that sentence would have broken me. I would have rushed to fix it. I would have apologized for existing in a way that caused her distress. Now, I just saw it for what it was. A manipulation tactic. A hook. She wasn't crying because she was worried about me. She was crying because she was terrified I had flushed the winning ticket down the toilet, or that I was going to run away with the money that was supposed to save them from their own incompetence. I didn't reply. I looked at the sticky note on my laptop. Ethan had written 3 rules for this call. 1. Do not argue emotions. Facts only. 2. Do not defend yourself. You are the one asking the questions. 3. Do not promise them a cent until they confess. I added a 4th rule in my head. 4. Don't blink. I reached out and picked up the $2 lottery ticket. It was sitting in its plastic sleeve next to my mouse pad. It looked so innocent, a scrap of cardboard with bright colors and scratch-off latex. It was worth less than a cup of coffee and materials, but it carried the weight of a nuclear warhead. I held it up to the light. The numbers were still there. 9, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I placed it back down, angling it so it would be just out of the camera's frame. I didn't want them to see it immediately. I wanted to be the one to reveal it. I checked the time. 7:58. I typed out the ultimatum I had drafted earlier, just to have the words fresh in my mind. I will pay off the debt to save Grandma's house. I will clear the lien, but in exchange, you sign a binding agreement that none of you, not Mom, not Dad, not Gavin, will ever have legal access to her or her property again. You take the money, and you lose the control. That was the deal. I wasn't going to let them sink. I wasn't going to let my father go to jail for fraud. Even if he deserved it, I was going to bail them out. But the price of the bail was their power. I was buying my grandmother's freedom. $100 million seemed like a fair price for that. The computer chimed, a soft, digital tone that signaled the start of the end. I adjusted the camera one last time. I smoothed my hair. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor before the video feed cut in. I didn't look like the girl who cleaned up the Thanksgiving dishes. I looked like a CEO presiding over a hostile takeover. I clicked accept. The screen flickered, tried to buffer, and then resolved into a pixelated image. I saw them. They were squeezed together on a sofa in what looked like a private lounge on the ship. The background was a blur of expensive upholstery and a window showing the darkening blue of the ocean. My mother was in the middle, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My father was on her right, looking stiff and pale, his face a mask of forced stoicism. Sloane was on the left, looking anxious, her phone still in her hand, and Gavin. Gavin was sitting slightly apart from them, on the arm of the sofa. He was leaning forward, his eyes intense, predatory. He looked like a wolf who had just spotted a wounded deer. "Paisley!" My mother cried out the moment the connection stabilized. Her voice was tinny through the laptop speakers. "Oh, thank God. We have been so worried. Look at you. You look tired." "I am fine, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, unwaveringly calm. "We saw the news," my father blurted out. He couldn't help himself. "The gas station on Elm. Paisley, tell us. Just tell us." I looked at them. I looked at the fear and the hunger in their eyes. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. I let them sweat. "Yes," I said finally. "I have the ticket." I saw the collective release of breath. I saw Sloane grab Gavin's arm. I saw my mother close her eyes and whisper a prayer. "And?" Gavin asked, his voice tight. "Did you check the numbers? Is it the jackpot?" I reached for the ticket. I held it up to the camera, letting the winner claim form I had attached to the back dangle slightly. "It is the jackpot," I said. $100 million. The reaction was visceral. My mother let out a sob that sounded dangerously like a laugh. My father slumped back against the cushion, his face flushing red. Sloane actually shrieked. "Oh my God!" Sloane screamed. "Oh my God! Paisley! We are rich! We are actually rich!" 100 million, Gavin repeated, his eyes wide, his mental calculator already running at light speed. Okay, listen to me. This is huge, but we have to be smart. We have to protect this." "It is a miracle," my mother wept. "A family miracle. I knew it. I knew good things would happen to us." They were celebrating. They were high-fiving. They were already spending it. They had completely forgotten that 5 minutes ago. They were worried about my mental health. Now, I was just the delivery system for their salvation. I watched them for a moment longer. I let them enjoy the high. I let them reach the very peak of their delusion. "It is a lot of money," I said softly. "It changes everything," Gavin said, leaning closer to the camera. "Now, Paisley, I can fly back tomorrow. I can meet you. We can set up the accounts. I have a contact in the Caymans who specializes in—" "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Gavin froze. "What?" I said stop. I reached for my mouse. I clicked on the first file, Exhibit A. "Before we talk about the 100 million, I said, my voice turning to ice, "we need to talk about the 200,000. "What 200,000? My father asked, confused. "The $200,000 you owe to Apex Capital," I said. "The loan with the 25% interest rate that you co-signed with Gavin." The room on the ship went deadly silent. My father's face drained of color. Gavin's eyes narrowed into slits. "And," I continued, clicking the next file, "we need to talk about Grandma's house." I shared my screen. The image of the fraudulent deed transfer filled their view. The shaky, terrified signature of Eloise Mitchell was blown up to the size of a billboard. "I know," I said. "I know everything." The celebration was over. The execution had begun. The video feed stabilized. And there they were. The image was high definition enough to see the beads of sweat on my father's forehead. Despite the aggressive air conditioning of the cruise ship lounge, They were huddled together on a velvet banquette, framed by a window that displayed a perfect, cinematic sunset over the Atlantic Ocean. It looked like a promotional brochure for a life of leisure: golden light, crystal glasses half full of amber liquid, and smiles that were plastered on with desperate adhesive. In contrast, my screen was stark. I was sitting against a white wall, illuminated by the harsh, honest light of my laptop screen. I saw them register my appearance. I wasn't wearing the stained work clothes they were used to. I was wearing a crisp white shirt, my hair pulled back in a severe professional knot. I looked like a judge. "Paisley, darling!" My mother, Caroline, leaned into the camera lens. Her voice was a syrupy confection of maternal concern that made my teeth ache. "Oh, look at you. We have been so worried. We called and called. I just want us to be close. You know that, right? I just want this family to be together." She reached out and patted my father's knee. A staged gesture of unity. My father, Dale, cleared his throat. He was trying to summon the authoritative gravity he used to wield when I was a child. But his eyes were darting around the screen, looking for clues. "Your mother is right," he said, his voice gruff. "We need to communicate better. But, there have been rumors. The news back home, they are saying the winning ticket was sold at the Quick Stop." Gavin was sitting on the arm of the sofa, slightly detached from the main cluster, like a consultant observing a merger. His eyes were narrowed, assessing me, calculating the probability of the payout. He didn't speak. He just waited. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. "The rumors are true," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the daughterly deference they expected. "I have the ticket." The reaction was instantaneous. The tension in the lounge snapped. My father let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Sloane gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Is it?" Gavin finally spoke, his voice tight. "Is it the jackpot? Or just a lower-tier prize?" I looked directly into the camera lens, imagining I was looking into his soul. $100 million, I said. I let the number hang there. I counted 3 seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. In those 3 seconds, I watched the transformation. I watched the anxiety drain from their faces, replaced instantly by a voracious, terrifying hunger. It wasn't just relief, it was entitlement. My father sat up straighter. My mother wiped a non-existent tear and beamed. Sloane let out a squeal of pure delight. "Oh my God!" Sloane screamed, grabbing Gavin's shoulder. "We won! We actually won!" I knew it. I knew this trip was good luck. 100 million, Gavin repeated, and I could practically hear the gears in his head spinning. Calculating management fees, tax loopholes, and offshore diversions. He leaned forward, taking command of the conversation. "Okay, listen to me. Paisley," Gavin said, his voice dropping into his professional closer register. "This is a life-changing event, but it is dangerous. You are exposed. You need to shelter this immediately. I can fly back tomorrow. We will set up a family trust. I have the structure already in my head. We will put it in an LLC, manage the disbursement so you don't get hit with the gift tax when you distribute shares to mom and dad. We are going to handle this." "We," I said. "We are a family," Gavin said, smiling that shark-like smile. "We protect our own." "Protect," I repeated. "That is an interesting word. Gavin," I moved my mouse. "I agree," I continued. "We need to talk about protection, and we need to talk about finances, because before we discuss the $100 million, we need to discuss the liabilities." "What liabilities?" my father asked, his smile faltering slightly. "Paisley, don't worry about the small stuff. We are rich." "I am going to share my screen now," I said. "I want you all to look very closely." I clicked the button. The video of my face shrank to a small box in the corner of their display. Replaced by the high-resolution scan of Exhibit A, it was the loan agreement from Apex Capital. I had zoomed in on the crucial section. The principal amount, the 25% interest rate, and the default clauses that explicitly listed personal assets as collateral. And at the bottom, glowing in the high-definition scan, were the signatures: Dale Mitchell, Gavin Rourke. "What is this?" my father whispered. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he might faint. "This is a loan for $200,000 with a predatory interest rate," I narrated calmly. "It was taken out 6 months ago. The payments are 3 months behind. According to the fine print, which I'm sure Gavin read, default allows the lender to seize all listed assets, including your landscaping business, Dad." I watched Gavin. He didn't panic. He stared at the screen. His jaw set hard. He knew he had been caught, but he was calculating a way out. "This is standard business leverage," Gavin said dismissively. "It is a bridge loan. I was handling it. We were going to refinance once the market turned." "The market didn't turn," I said. "But you did have a plan B, didn't you?" I clicked to the next file, Exhibit B. The screen changed. Now, it showed the deed transfer for 1402 Maplewood Drive. "Grandma's house," I said. My mother stopped smiling. She froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. "I want you to look at the date," I said. "October 14th, and I want you to look at the signature." I zoomed in on the shaky, erratic scrawl of Eloise Mitchell. "We have the hospital records," I continued, my voice relentless. "On October 14th, Grandma was administered heavy sedatives. She was disoriented. She didn't know who she was. And yet, miraculously, she signed a complex legal document transferring her only home to you, Mom." "She wanted us to have it," Caroline stammered, her voice trembling. "She told me to take care of it. Paisley, you don't understand. We were doing it for her care." "I have a sworn affidavit from Aunt June," I said. She saw you guiding her hand. She heard Gavin in the hallway saying that the house was the only leverage left." "That is a lie," Gavin snapped. "June is a senile old bat. You are going to take her word over ours?" "I am taking the word of the handwriting expert who confirmed the signature was coerced." I lied. I didn't have the expert yet, but they didn't know that. "And I am taking the word of the law. This is elder abuse. Gavin, it is fraud. And with the documentation I have, it is a felony." The word felony hung in the air like smoke. My father looked at my mother with a mixture of horror and betrayal. He hadn't known about the hospital coercion. He had just signed where Gavin told him to sign. "You said she agreed," Dale whispered to Caroline. "You told me she wanted to sell." "She did!" Caroline shrieked, her composure cracking. "We needed the money. Dale, we were going to lose everything. Gavin said it was the only way." Sloane was silent. She was looking back and forth between her husband and her parents, her eyes wide with confusion. She was the golden child, the one who floated above the mess. She didn't understand what was happening. "But wait," Sloane said, her voice small. Gavin said the business was doing great. He said the loan was for expansion." "Gavin lied," I said. "I was protecting you," Gavin shouted, losing his cool for the first time. He stood up, pacing in the small lounge area. "I was trying to keep this family afloat. Do you think your lifestyle is free? Sloane, do you think the cruises and the clothes just appear out of thin air? I have been juggling chainsaws for 5 years to keep you in that bubble." "And now for the final piece," I said. I looked at Sloane. "I am sorry. Sloane, I really am. But you need to see this. You need to stop pretending." I clicked the final file, Exhibit C. It was the screenshot of the text conversation between Gavin and Tessa Vaughn. I had highlighted the specific exchange from 2 weeks ago. "Gavin, Sloane is nagging me about the upgrade to the suite. I will put it on the new card once the house title clears. Tessa, just keep her happy until the deal closes. Gavin, that is the plan. Sloane is just a bridge. Once we liquidate the old lady's asset, I can balance the books and we can finally start the new firm. I just need her to smile for the photos a little longer. Sloane is just a bridge." I watched my sister read it. I saw her lips move as she sounded out the words. The silence on the ship was absolute. The background noise of the ocean seemed to fade away. Sloane didn't scream. She didn't throw her phone. She went very, very still. She turned her head slowly to look at her husband. Gavin had stopped pacing. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. He knew there was no spinning this. There was no business context for calling his wife a bridge. "A bridge?" Sloane whispered. "Sloane, honey, that is out of context," Gavin started, holding up his hands. "Tessa is just a colleague. We were talking about—" "You told me you invested my inheritance," Sloane said, her voice shaking. "You told me it was in a long-term trust." "It is," Gavin said quickly. "It is safe." "Is it?" I cut in. "Or is it in Apex Capital's pocket?" Sloane stood up. She was trembling from head to toe. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had paraded around as a trophy of her success. "Answer me," she said to him. "Do not lie. Not now. Is there any money left?" Gavin looked at her. He looked at the screen where the evidence of his ruin was glowing. He looked at my father, who had his head in his hands. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sloane let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It was the sound of an illusion shattering. She sat back down, hard, as if her legs had given out. I took a deep breath. The demolition was complete. The foundation was gone. "Now," I said. "Here is the deal." They all looked at me. I was the only thing standing between them and prison. I was the only thing standing between them and total bankruptcy. "I have spoken to my lawyer," I said. "We have prepared a document. It is a full release of claims regarding Grandma Eloise and her property. I am going to pay off the Apex loan," I said. "I am going to clear the debt so Dad doesn't go to jail, and you don't lose your house. I am going to buy Grandma's house from you for the market value, which will clear the rest of your immediate debts." My mother looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Oh, Paisley, thank you. Thank you. We can—" "Shut up," I said. "I am not finished." I leaned into the camera. "In exchange, you are going to sign the release. It states that none of you, not Caroline, not Dale, not Gavin, and not Sloane, will ever have power of attorney, legal guardianship, or access to Eloise Mitchell's assets ever again. You are resigning your rights. You are giving her to me." "But she is my mother," Caroline protested weakly. "You lost the right to call her that when you forced a pen into her hand while she was drugged," I said. "You sign the papers, or I send these files to the district attorney, and I let the bank foreclose on everything you own." I looked at Gavin. "And you, Gavin, you are going to sign a document admitting that the debt was yours. If you ever try to contact me, or Grandma, or claim a single cent of my lottery win, I will release the full file of your business dealings to the State Ethics Board. You will never work in finance again, not even as a teller." Gavin looked at me with pure hatred, but he nodded. He knew checkmate when he saw it. "I am sending the documents to the ship's concierge to print," I said. "Sign them, scan them, send them back to my lawyer within 1 hour." "Paisley," my father said, his voice broken. "We are family. How can you be so cold?" I looked at the ticket sitting on my desk, the $2 ticket they had laughed about. "I learned from the best. Dad," I said. "You gave me a $2 ticket because you thought that was what I was worth. Now I am buying my freedom. Keep the change." I didn't wait for their response. I didn't wait for the apologies, or the begging, or the fake tears. I moved my mouse to the red button. End call. I clicked it. The screen went black. The sunset. The luxury lounge. The frantic faces of my family. They all vanished. I was alone in the quiet apartment. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and my own steady breathing. I sat there for a long time, staring at the black screen. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would feel a rush of adrenaline. Instead, I just felt clean. I picked up the lottery ticket. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was just a piece of paper. I put it in the drawer. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "Hello?" a gravelly voice answered. "It is done, Ethan," I said. "Expect the papers in an hour." "Good work, Paisley," he said. "How do you feel?" I looked out the window at the city lights of Kansas City, somewhere out there, in a nursing home that smelled of lavender and waiting. My grandmother was sleeping. Tomorrow, I was going to tell her she was going home. "I feel," I said, "like I finally scratched the winning number." The return of the Royal Caribbean Jubilee to the port in Florida was not the triumphant homecoming my family had anticipated. When they walked down the gangway, they did not look like the Golden Mitchell family of Overland Park. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. They were sunburned, exhausted, and carrying the crushing weight of the reality that was waiting for them on the dock. I wasn't there to meet them. I was in Ethan Caldwell's conference room in Kansas City, sipping tea and watching the legal machinery dismantle Gavin Rourke's house of cards. Gavin's unraveling began the moment his phone reconnected to the domestic cellular network, while he was at sea, trying to manage the damage control with my father. The real world had been busy. Ethan had filed the affidavits. The State Banking Commission had flagged the accounts associated with his firm for suspicious activity regarding the elder abuse allegations. When Gavin tried to pay for the parking garage at the airport, his corporate card was declined. It was a small humiliation, but it was the first domino. Back in Kansas, the fallout was swift and clinical. I had transferred the funds to clear the Apex Capital loan. I paid the full $200,000, plus the exorbitant interest and the penalties. I didn't send the money to Gavin to handle. I wired it directly to the lender. I denied Gavin the satisfaction of touching the money, and more importantly, I denied him the commission he likely would have tried to skim off the top. The lien on my father's business was lifted. He wasn't going to jail, but he wasn't free, either. The meeting to sign the final property release took place 3 days after they returned. It was held at Ethan's office. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Ethan sat to my right. My family sat on the other side. They looked smaller. The bluster, the arrogance, the polished veneer. It was all gone. My father wore a suit that looked like it hadn't been pressed. My mother was pale, her hands clutching her purse as if it contained the last scraps of her dignity. Sloane sat at the far end, wearing sunglasses indoors. Refusing to look at anyone, Gavin was not there. Ethan had barred him from the building, dealing only with his attorney by phone. Ethan slid the documents across the table. "This is the transfer of deed," Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It returns full ownership of the property at 1402 Maplewood Drive to the Eloise Mitchell Trust. It also includes a permanent restraining order regarding financial decisions. Neither Caroline Mitchell nor Dale Mitchell will ever have power of attorney over Eloise Mitchell again. You are resigning your executorship effective immediately." My mother looked at the papers. Her hand trembled as she reached for a pen. Then, she stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears that might have even been real this time. "Paisley," she said, her voice cracking. "We are still your parents. I know we made mistakes, but we were drowning. Can't you, you have so much now. $100 million. Couldn't you just share a little? Just to help us get back on our feet? We could start over. We could be a family again." It was the moment I had practiced for, the moment where the old Paisley would have caved. The old Paisley would have written a check just to make the awkwardness go away, just to buy a fleeting moment of their approval. But I looked at her, and I didn't see a mother asking for help. I saw a stranger trying to negotiate a transaction. I didn't speak. I nodded to Ethan. Ethan leaned forward. He placed his hand flat on the table. "Mrs. Mitchell," Ethan said, his tone like a steel door slamming shut. "The offer on the table is this. Paisley pays off the debts you incurred by defrauding a demented woman, and in exchange, you do not go to prison for felony elder abuse. There is no negotiation. There is no sharing. You sign, or I call the district attorney, and we take this to trial. I assure you. The jury will not be sympathetic." My mother flinched as if she had been slapped. She looked at my father, but he was staring at the table. Defeated, he knew the game was over. "Sign it, Caroline," my father whispered. She signed. As the ink dried, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. The house was safe. Grandma was safe. The consequences for the rest of them rippled out over the next few weeks, like shockwaves from an explosion. My father, Dale, lost his standing as the pillar of the family. The rumors started small, whispers at the country club, glances at the grocery store, but they spread fast. Aunt June had told a few cousins the truth, and the truth has a way of finding the cracks. Everyone knew that Dale Mitchell hadn't just hit a rough patch. He had tried to sell his own mother's house to cover his bad bets. He had to sell his boat. Then the second car, then, quietly, he put the house on the market to downsize. He walked with a stoop now, the swagger of the successful businessman, replaced by the shuffle of a man who knows he has been found out. Sloane's collapse was more public. The divorce filing hit the court docket 2 weeks after the cruise. It wasn't amicable. During the discovery phase of the financial investigation, Sloane found out that the bridge comment wasn't the worst of it. Gavin hadn't just used her as a social shield. He had used her credit. He had opened 3 credit cards in her name, maxed them out to fund his image, the leased cars, the expensive dinners, the watches, and hidden the statements. She wasn't a wealthy divorcee. She was 36 years old, saddled with $50,000 in debt she hadn't known existed, and realized that her entire marriage had been a long con. I didn't revel in her pain. I didn't send her a text saying, "I told you so." I just let her be. The reality was punishment enough. But while their lives were shrinking, mine was expanding. The day I brought Grandma Eloise home was the first clear. Sunny day in December. I had spent the previous week preparing the house. I used a fraction of the lottery winnings to hire a team of contractors who worked around the clock. They didn't change the soul of the house. I wouldn't let them. But they fixed the bones. They installed a wheelchair ramp that blended beautifully with the front porch. They renovated the bathroom to be accessible. They updated the heating system so the drafty old hallways were finally warm. I hired a team of 3 nurses to provide 24-hour care. They were kind women, vetted by Ethan, who actually listened when Grandma spoke. I drove to the meadows in my new car. It wasn't a Ferrari. It was a solid, reliable Volvo SUV with top-rated safety features. I walked into room 304 for the last time. Grandma was sitting in her chair, a small suitcase packed beside her. She looked up when I entered. "Is it time?" she asked. "It is time," I said. I wheeled her out of that place. We didn't look back. We didn't say goodbye to the smell of lavender and waiting. When we pulled into the driveway of 1402 Maplewood Drive, Grandma started to cry. She didn't make a sound. The tears just rolled down her cheeks as she looked at the house she thought she had lost forever. I wheeled her up the new ramp and into the living room. I had placed a massive vase of fresh hydrangeas on the mantel, blue ones, her favorite. "We are home, Grandma," I said. She reached out and touched the wall, as if verifying it was real. "It is warm," she whispered. "It is so warm." That night, we didn't have a massive party. I didn't invite the neighbors. I didn't invite the media. I set the dining room table for 3. Me, Grandma Eloise, and Aunt June. We ordered takeout from Grandma's favorite Chinese restaurant. We drank tea. We laughed about things that had nothing to do with money or lawsuits. For the first time in my life, I sat at a dinner table where I wasn't serving. I wasn't the landscape girl or the failure. I was just Paisley, and that was enough. After dinner, as June was cleaning up the teacups, Grandma waved me over to her chair. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a worn, yellowed envelope. "I wrote this a long time ago," she said, her voice a little raspy but strong. 5 years ago, before the fog got bad, I told myself to give it to you when you finally stopped waiting for them to love you." She pressed it into my hand. "Open it later." I waited until she was asleep in her own bed, under her own quilt. I went out to the porch, sat on the swing, and opened the envelope. The handwriting was firm and looped, the way it used to be before the tremor started. My dearest Paisley, if you are reading this, it means something has changed. Maybe you finally stood up to your father. Maybe you walked away. Or maybe, God willing, you found a way to build your own garden away from their weeds. I know how much you want their approval. I watch you at every Thanksgiving, running around, trying to be useful, trying to earn a seat at a table where they only see you as a servant. It breaks my heart, but I cannot save you from it. You have to save yourself. I want you to know one thing. If a day comes when you have the chance to leave the table where you are only invited to serve, please, leave without guilt. Do not look back. You do not owe them your life just because they gave you birth. You are the bloomer in a family of rocks. Go find your son. Love, Grandma. I sat there in the dark, the letter trembling in my hand. 5 years ago, she had seen it all. She had seen the dynamic, the abuse, the silent rejection, and she had given me permission to let go long before I had the money to do it. I looked out at the dark lawn. The wind was rustling the dried stalks of the hydrangeas I had planted. I realized then that the $100 million hadn't saved me. The money was just a tool. It was a hammer to break the chains, but it wasn't the freedom itself. The freedom was in the letter. The freedom was in the realization that I didn't need them to tell me I was valuable. I didn't keep all the money. I set up the Hydrangea Trust to manage the bulk of it. I established a scholarship fund for students studying landscape architecture, kids who, like me, preferred the company of plants to the politics of people. I funded a legal aid clinic for the elderly to help prevent cases like Grandma's. And I kept working. I didn't quit Northway Green Studio. I still put on my boots every morning. I still got dirt under my fingernails. I still smelled like mulch and rain. Because that was who I was. The money didn't change that. It just meant I never had to worry about a bill again. My family is still out there. My parents are living in a condo in a cheaper part of town, telling anyone who will listen that they were victims of a complicated legal misunderstanding. Sloan is working as a receptionist at a salon. Learning for the first time what it means to earn a paycheck, Gavin is entangled in lawsuits that will likely follow him for the rest of his life. I don't hate them. I don't love them. I just don't think about them. They are just characters in a story I finished writing. I am sitting on the porch with Grandma now. The spring is coming. The hydrangeas are starting to push up new green shoots through the soil. They are resilient. They survive the winter. And when they bloom, they will be magnificent. Just like us. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below telling me which country or city you are in. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to Emma Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe, and remember, know your worth, and never be afraid to leave the table.